We've all heard the Vatican leaks, that information can't be kept quiet in Rome with things that are being done or planned, documents we hear about weeks in advance. Before Francis's new document on the papacy, I did a report on it saying that this was coming, and it was a radical plan to transform the papacy into the image and likeness of synodality. And then it happened a few days later. There are many such cases of this, Traditionis Custodes being the most obvious example, as was Fiducia Supplicans, and a whole host of other things they were doing. Well, Francis is tired of the leaks. He wants to plug the leaks. I'm reminded of the kids from the story of the kid in the Netherlands with his finger in the dam trying to stop the leaks from happening as more and more keeps springing up. That's kind of the story we're talking about here. It's kind of a fool's errand he's on, but he is going to try it nonetheless. And so remember, certain news outlets that we use here on this channel are very much aligned with Francis, unequivocally aligned with him on the grander scheme of things, even if there are disputes between their country and Rome on just how far to push things. On the grand scheme of things, they're aligned perfectly with him. Remember that when we use this one, Katholisch.de, the official news arm of the German bishops outlet, or the official news arm of the German Bishops Conference, the same bishops from the German Synodal Way. They give us this headline: report, Pope Francis wants to tighten up dealings with the press. Pope Francis has repeatedly caused criticism with spontaneous statements at non-public meetings, most recently on James Martin candidates for the priesthood, for example. Now, the Vatican wants to have more control over spontaneous statements made by the Pope. Now, you might think, well, that doesn't have anything to do with what you just said. This is the guys they're doing this under. Good luck getting Francis to not give spontaneous statements to either the press or to non-public events, group meetings with priests, meetings with groups of laity, as we'll see in a second here. Good luck keeping them from talking to the press. I don't know what it is they think they're going to accomplish by trying to keep a tight rein on the Catholic press that are officially sanctioned by Rome, meaning given permission to report on things. I don't know what they think they're going to accomplish. But it's not, again, this is not only about spontaneous statements he makes that cause a stir. But in general, the Vatican is very leaky. There are decent priests who work in the Roman Curia who feel it is their duty to alert the faithful to changes coming down the road. So they contact their media sources and they give them information that's not public. Francis has been trying desperately to plug these leaks, as you'll see here. So from the article, quote, Pope Francis is said to have decided to further tighten the handling of the press accredited to the Holy See. The Italian newspaper Il Messaggero reported on Sunday that the pontiff has added further restrictions to those already in place. For example, many of the audio recordings of the group audiences in the Apostolic Palace will no longer be available, nor will the prepared text of the speeches. These were always provided with a blocking period and distributed to journalists in order to facilitate press work. Only the speeches of the general audience on Wednesday and at the Angelus prayer on Sunday will remain available in advance. The text to be distributed to journalists are only those actually spoken by the Pope, in order to give the Vatican a certain degree of control over spontaneous statements. Pause here for a second. That document about the changing of the papacy, that study document, which, as someone said in my comments in my live stream yesterday, a study document can also be called a mission statement. This is like the first step in trying to change things. It's not dogmatic. It isn't magisterially binding yet, but this is meant to lay the groundwork for future changes. But you'll notice something. About half an hour after the reporting on that, after it was released, you had articles giving you full outlines of the thing. How do you think that happened? They were given advance copies to help facilitate their press work. They're not going to do that anymore. That's kind of odd. It makes full sense that a document that the Vatican has would be given to trusted members of the press. If somebody releases an article days before that gives full details, then they should not be accredited anymore. That would be logical. But instead, they're actually going to be hamstringing the reporting in general on things. So the next big document they release, probably on the Sacred Heart, remember that one is coming. When that one is issued in, I think they said September, it will probably be a day until after where you get a full write-up of what's in the document. That's unfortunate for everybody in the press, but that is how Rome is going to handle these things now. But let's continue. According to the report, the new measures are intended to supplement the existing ones that the head of the church has issued in the course of his pontificate. These include the ban on an international press pool during visits by heads of state and interview questions when traveling internationally. Questions are therefore only permitted if they are directly related to the country visited and its history. Journalists are being kept at a safe distance during this phase of the pontificate, which is characterized by disputes within the church, the report states. Francis prefers to choose his dialogue partners for in-depth interviews himself. The incidents in the Pope's communication are numerous, especially those words that are misunderstood and misinterpreted. Only recently, at a non-public meeting with Italian bishops, the Pope warned that in seminaries there was too much of the James Martin stuff in the seminaries. After these words were first publicized in the Italian and then the international media, the Pope distanced himself from them. The Vatican published an official apology and emphasized that the pontiff has not intended to offend anyone. A passage from an interview with the American television station CBS also caused a stir, in which the Pope spoke strictly against the diaconate of women. Likewise, he recently rode back his clericalism statements. End quote. A lot of the syntax here gets clunky using a translating extension, but you get the idea. But here's the thing. Since when has the press been against Francis? I don't have an answer to that question. Yeah, the alternative Catholic press, the traditional media, the conservative Catholic media, mostly in America and some other places, yeah, they tend to be a lot more critical, extraordinarily more critical than most of the press that were in that press pool. But Vatican News is not going to be against him. That's the official news arm of the Vatican. The Katholisch.de, which we just read from, isn't going to be against him. That's the German bishops. The only time they're ever against him is when he tells them no about their radical changes. It's the only time. Otherwise, their disagreements with him is that he's not going far enough for them. So I don't understand why they're doing this except to plug leaks. They're trying to stop the leak of information because it gets people up in arms about this, and for good reasons, I think. Dr. Obvious is asking for prayers, 2 hours of sleep after driving 1,200 miles. It's a work-related trip from the looks of it. I understand. Here's a bit of a heads up. I'll be going on a road trip in July, so it'll be a lot of driving that I'll be doing because I'm the only one who drives in the family, and I will still be doing live streams in the morning and producing content from hotel rooms and things for a few days. It'll be just like last April after that tornado, except for good reasons. So prayers for Dr. Obvious. Now, again, this plugging of leaks is kind of a thing. This would make access to the information in the Vatican very, very exclusive. Now, speaking of exclusive, Francis leveled some accusations and warnings to traditional Catholics wrapped in ambiguity again. He was speaking on Thursday to a group of leaders of lay associations of the faithful and telling them how to run lay associations and keep them good in his eyes. He pivoted a bit then, warning them not to make their organizations exclusive and exclusionary, which is something he has always said about traditionalism, and said that groups that fit that description should be suppressed, meaning traditionalist groups, because, again, one of his biggest criticisms of traditionalist groups is that they're rigid and that they're not welcoming for everyone. We go to the Vatican's website for this. This is the text that they published after his meeting here. We're just going to do a small portion of it because we're not looking to do the whole thing. But he's giving them a bunch of steps, like tips, like there are certain facets of a lay association of the faithful that he believes makes them good. And here is his advice to them. We're going to the second piece of advice. So quoting Francis directly, quote, "Second, overcoming exclusiveness. Following the second announcement of the Passion, John objects to a man who was casting out demons in Jesus' name, but was not of their group of disciples. Teacher, he said, we saw a man casting out demons in your name, and we forbade him because he was not following us. Jesus disapproves of this attitude and tells him, whoever is not against us is for us. And then he invites all the apostles to be attentive so as not to be a stumbling block to others. Please let us be wary of the temptation of the closed circle. Though chosen to be the foundation of the new people of God, open to all nations of the earth, the apostles failed to grasp this expansive vision. They withdraw into themselves, seemingly intent on safeguarding the gifts bestowed on them by the Master, such as healing the sick, casting out demons, proclaiming the kingdom, as if they were privileges. The following are also challenges for us: limiting ourselves to what our circle thinks, being convinced that what we do is right for everyone, and defending, perhaps inadvertently, positions, prerogatives, or the prestige of the group. Alternatively, we could also be impeded by the fear of losing our sense of belonging and identity by opening up to other people and differing viewpoints, which stems from failing to recognize diversity as an opportunity rather than a threat. These are enclosures in which we all risk imprisonment. Let us be attentive. Our own group, our own spirituality, are realities that help us journey with the people of God. But they are not privileges, for there is the danger of ending up imprisoned in these enclosures. Synodality instead asks us to look beyond the barriers with magnanimity, to see the presence of God and his actions even in people we do not know, in new pastoral approaches, in uncharted mission territories. It asks us to let ourselves be moved, even hurt by the voice, the experience and suffering of others, of our fellow believers and all those around us. Be open with an open heart. End quote. Truly inspiring words from the pontiff. James Orth is asking for a prayer and has a prayer intention. Please pray for a friend that has leukemia, also is converted to the Roman Catholic faith. Yes, that is Francis telling us to. This is the big traditional. See, he often will do this in subtler ways like this, but one of his key criticisms of traditionally minded Catholics and traditional Catholicism is that it is indeed audio glitches, line noise. Yeah, I tried to broadcast this in higher def, and I guess I can't do that. I guess I have to turn my camera into a potato, basically. We'll fix this for tomorrow, unfortunately. But Francis basically is telling traditionalists not to bother, or to basically don't turn people into traditionalists. That's what he's doing. Now, finally, in the same line of thinking with this, Francis met with some comedians yesterday. And I don't know if you heard this. Part of not being exclusive is our ability to laugh at God. Yeah, we can laugh at God now. So, headline from Vatican News, Pope to comedians. Help us to dream of a better world. Pope Francis meets with more than 100 comedians from around the world, encouraging them to cheer people up and help people see reality with all its contradictions. Yeah, that's fine. But laugh at God, right? Let's get some context, because I'm sure some people say you're taking it out of context. Not really. Let's go to the article. Quote, comedians are the most well-loved and applauded entertainers, Pope Francis said on Friday morning, because they have and cultivate the gift of making people laugh. With so much gloomy news in the midst of both public and personal crises, comedians are able to spread serenity and a smile, and are among the few who can speak to very different people of different generations and different cultural backgrounds. Precisely because laughter is contagious, it can break down social barriers and create connections, the Pope said, noting that comedians remind us that playful fun and laughter are central to human life. End quote. Let's pause there. He's not wrong. He was saying this, though, to Stephen Colbert, Whoopi Goldberg, Jim Gaffigan, and other figures who use their comedic gifts, if you want to call them that, to spread division, to incite animosity among people, to help polarize society. He was saying this to them, and not in a corrective way. I mean, the pictures of him hugging them is pretty clear. That's what he was doing. But let's continue. It's not a very long article. Pope Francis told comedians they're in possession of a precious gift that can spread peace within hearts and between peoples, helping us to overcome difficulties and cope with daily stress. The Holy Father went on to highlight another miracle of comedians, the ability to make people smile even when tackling serious issues. You denounce the excesses of power, give voice to forgotten situations, highlight abuses, point out inappropriate behavior, but without spreading alarm and fear and anxiety, he told them. Taking a mystical turn, Pope Francis pointed out that in creation, divine wisdom practiced your art for the benefit of none other than God himself, the first spectator in history, with God delighting in the works he had made. Remember this, he told comedians, when you manage to bring intelligent smiles to the lips of even a single spectator, you also make God smile. Let's pause here. When you manage to bring intelligent smiles to the lips of even a single spectator, you make God smile. Okay. There are comedians who tell some, we'll call that high-level humor, right? Humor for people with a lot that are overeducated and things. And their humor is vulgar at the same time as being wrapped up in intelligence. And so when you bring in intelligent smiles to the lips of even a single person, you make God smile. Results may vary, is all I'm saying on that. Anyway, he emphasized that thinking and speaking with a sense of humor helps us to understand and get a sense of human nature. Humor, the Pope said, does not offend, does not humiliate, does not nail people to their faults. Unlike other forms of communication, he argued humor is never against anyone, but is also inclusive and proactive, and arouses openness, sympathy, and empathy. In fact, the Pope said we can even laugh at God, just as we play and joke with those we love. But he said this must be done without offending the religious feelings of believers, especially the poor. I don't know why the religious feelings of the poor matter more than anybody else. And I know Jesus told us about the poor and how we're supposed to care for them and all the rest. No one disputes that. But I don't understand why the piety of the poor is more important than the piety of anybody else. But you get the idea. He frames all this in creating a better world. Creating a better world. And then we got another prayer intention in here. Let's see. Deborah Saint says, please remember me in your prayers, everyone. My orthopedic surgeon says I need a total reverse shoulder replacement. I'm still recovering from that. Yeah, okay. Please pray for Deborah, please. Leston says, so when it rains, the comedians must be doing a really bad job making God cry so much. Yes, that must be it. I have to say with this comedian thing, the English language media is mostly talking about the comedians from the English speaking world that are there, the Gaffigans and the Colberts and the Whoopi Goldbergs and the like. Kevin James is a comedian. He's a Catholic actor in the United States, traditional one too, actually, judging by the pictures of him attending Mass with Father Ripperger. I don't think he was there. And the comedians from other parts of the world, some of them are really eyebrow raising. Some of them who are very, very much pro Moloch ritual, like openly. But then again, so is Whoopi Goldberg, so is Colbert, and he's smiling and hugging with them. If you want to see the tone deafness of the current state of the church right now, in one image, it's a picture of him meeting with them. Oh, and he also gave a hug to dear leader at the G7 meeting. The G7 is the socioeconomic meeting of the 7 top economies of the world. They're leaders. They all get together. And dear leader was there, good old Sleepy Joe himself. And the pictures there were really bizarre, weird. But that probably has to do more with Sleepy Joe's condition than anything else. Casey Royals fan says Gaffigan took his children to one of those marches for the deadly sin being celebrated this month. Yeah. I remember liking Gaffigan like 20 years ago. Things have changed though, very, very much. All right, folks. If there's any final thoughts on this in the live chat today, we get them in now. Otherwise, we will wrap this up. Any final prayer intentions too, because some of you I know are putting prayer intentions in the chat, and I love seeing that. So, Sonny Jim says the Pope is tone deaf. Those comedians would be at his throat if he said something unwoke. Yeah, it's true. They would be. Imagine if Benedict XVI met with them. The things he said to them would be markedly different. But secondly, their reaction, I mean, I don't think most of them would even accept it. Maybe the actual Catholic ones would, because some of them are Catholic adjacent, like Whoopi Goldberg isn't actually Catholic as far as I know. But she's done a lot of humor related to the church. But I think that there would be a very different kind of response. I got to say, one of the things when I first saw that story, when I was reading it, the thought I had was Andrew Dice Clay. Bringing a smile to God's lips is such a bizarre idea. If you're familiar with Andrew Dice Clay, that ages me a little bit. Anybody younger won't recognize the name, but the older members of the audience will, because he was probably the highest profile comedian in the late 80s to mid 90s, and the language he used and the kinds of jokes he told were fit only for late night HBO. That was it. That's the only place they could broadcast his humor. I don't think they could even really show a lot of his things on Comedy Central because of just how spicy they were. And the idea of him bringing a smile to God's lips is so strange. So strange. Joe Sanders says, my beliefs that many comedians and audience believe that anything obscene is funny. That is kind of where we are right now. And that's why there are a handful of comedians who upset people they might drop a few of the like spicier, like bad words in their comedy, but they're at least much more intelligent than a lot of these guys. But go watch some comedy shorts on YouTube. Like, if you, well, don't do that, because most of the time you're going to be seeing a lot of things you shouldn't hear, a lot of things you shouldn't hear. But if you were to do that, you would end up seeing that it's mostly lowest common denominator humor, unfortunately. Dean remembers Andrew Dice Clay. Yeah. For simpler times, I think. All right, folks. Thanks very much for tuning in today. As always, pray for the church and for those intentions that are in the live chat today. And put prayer intentions in the comment section later if you so choose. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.